Hello and welcome back to my studio. It's Lois here from Lois and Morgana Davidson Art, and today I'm going to be showing you how I painted this beginner-friendly winter scene with fir trees, distant mountains and deep snow. And when I say beginner-friendly, I mean that it's a nice, loose, simple painting, but that doesn't mean that it's an easy painting. It may take a few times to get it right, especially if you're a complete beginner. There's a lot of techniques here that need to be mastered, but it's a sort of challenge that beginners can rise to. And of course, all these techniques are transferable skills that you take with you on your creative journey and use them over and over again if you're wanting to paint and learn to paint watercolour landscapes. So the first thing I did was to sketch out the scene here. There's a reference photo available on Patreon if you're interested, so please follow the links below if you're interested in that and the advert-free version of this demo. You can pause the video here and study the very light sketch that I've made in pencil, positioning my distant mountains, trees and my sort of very plain snowy foreground, keeping it really simple. And to make it even easier to create our snow effects on the trees, I'm going to be using masking fluid. My masking fluid is Pebeo drawing gum, and I'm using an old brush for this. Never use your good brushes for masking fluid. Use an old brush and first of all rinse out the bristles and rub some hand soap or some brush cleaning soap all the way into the bristles right up to the ferrule, and this helps to protect it from the liquid latex. And then use the same soap to wash the brush out immediately after use and rub a little soap into the hairs of the brush before putting it away to dry. So you can see here I'm just using these little dotting and dashing motions to apply the masking fluid here and there over my tree outlines. And if you can pause the video here, you can see where I've put the masking fluid because it's a pale blue colour. I need to leave it to dry completely, and that should protect the white of the paper. So I'm going to wet my page all over. My paper is Canson Moulin de Roy 140-pound cold pressed watercolour paper. It's taped to my board, and my board's at an angle of about 20 to 30 degrees. So I'm using a large wash brush. Any large wash brush will do, but mine is a Princeton Aqua Elite 1.5 inch mottler. And now I'm going to be painting my sky. This is indigo with a touch of light red or Venetian red, using horizontal brush strokes, creating a graduated wash, darker across the top, lighter towards the horizon, a little bit darker across the land where the trees are, lighter again for the snow, then a bit darker across the bottom of the tape. This is indigo, and now I'm adding a little bit more of the Venetian red or light red. You can see to get that kind of really lovely pinkish glow. It really works well with the indigo. Just strengthening up a little bit of tone. It's all softly diffusing into the page, so across where my land is, just to start off the values there, keeping it sort of all light to mid value at the moment. That's where my distant mountain will be. Then adding just a bit of extra tone across the foreground. So you can see how I've got my indigo and light red across the top. It's fading out as we come down to the horizon and then getting a little bit darker. And now adding just a little bit of tone to that tree area, and then I've dipped into almost tube consistency sepia and indigo. And I'm using the corner of my brush and I'm painting in as much of those tree branches as I can. Of course I can paint over the masking fluid because that will protect my areas of white, but I still don't want to completely block that whole area in, and I want to try and follow the direction of my tree branches if I can. Trying to sort of just get in little hints of the tree trunks here and there. Trying to maintain that distinctive shape that these trees have. This particular stand of trees has sort of upward bending branches, and I'm trying to sort of indicate that. And then moving across again with this same rich paint, putting in a little bit more darker, firmer detail in the distance for distant lines of trees. And then using a clean damp flat brush to run across the bottom of those areas. That softens it back, gives me a nice clean line, so I've got the top of my hill, and it pushes these back further into the distance. And so I'll continue building up the distance and the shadows in and around the trees until I'm happy with it. I'm nearly at the end of this first wet in wet stage, which of course is the main stage, and I'm now using my palette knife, and I'm dragging the tip of the palette knife gently through the damp paint and just creating a few more hints of branches, scraping back almost to the white of the paper and just adding variety to what's already there, but being careful not to dig into the paper too much where I've got masking fluid. And now leaving it all to dry completely. So here's the dry painting. You can see that everything's softened and diffused, and we've managed to build up quite a lot of fairly dark values in and around the trees. Now I need to use the wet on dry technique to bring together the work that I did using the wet on wet technique in the first stage. So using sort of a mid value of indigo with a touch of sepia in it, and my size 14 Escoda Perla round brush, I'm following my pencil line and painting in the shadow side of my mountain, leaving the light side really pale. I'll just add a few little dots and details on that just to really give the hint of the snow on those slopes and the light reflecting on that snow. Then building up just some slightly darker detail, and you can see the difference here using the wet on dry method. The paint stays where I put it. I get nice sort of hard edges instead of softly diffused edges like the ones that I was getting in the first stage. With this sort of wet in wet loose watercolour painting, the idea is to build up lots of lovely loose wet in wet washes that are softly diffused, building up the light and the mid-tones and some of the darks, and then using the wet on dry technique to bring together the painting with these harder edged, sharper marks that actually begins to build a little bit of definition into the painting itself. Without these harder marks, harder edged marks and darker marks, the painting all looks just a little bit undefined. It's important at this stage to make sure the painting is left to dry completely, because I now need to remove the masking fluid. The paper has to be bone dry, and always test your paper to make sure that it can handle masking fluid. Some cheaper papers will tear if you try to use it, so test a piece of your paper first before trying to use the masking fluid. Now I've rubbed away the masking fluid using a glue eraser or rubber cement pickup, which you can buy from DIY stores or art stores. It's a nice clean way of removing the masking fluid, but you can of course rub it away with a clean finger or use the tacky side of a piece of masking tape or an eraser. And this is a number 2 rigger, and it's a mixture again of my indigo and sepia, so 2 of my 3 colours that I've used for this limited palette painting. And I'm working around those harsh marks left by the masking fluid to blend them into the trees, make a slightly more natural looking mark, cover up where it looks too strong, and bringing in those lovely sort of dark deep shadows beneath the branches, and just painting that suggestion of snow. I've just darkened up the shadow side of the mountain so it stands out a little bit better against the trees in the distance, and using the tips of the flat brush, dragging a little bit of very pale tone across the snow from each tree trunk, just to create a little bit of shadow. And a final touch, as soon as my trees are bone dry, I've mixed up a really weak watery glaze of Venetian red. You can barely see any tint in it, but I'm glazing that over the white masking fluid marks that are left, and this just gives them that little bit of glow and brings the painting together and softens back the very bright white marks, putting them into a bit more shadow. So that's the finished painting, and when I remove the tape and show you how it looks when it's not in the bright lights of my studio, how the colours really do look in real life, hopefully you'll begin to see how beautiful this limited palette of 3 colours is. Indigo, Venetian red and sepia. It really works beautifully for a tranquil snow scene like this. And if you've enjoyed this demo, you may be interested in taking a look at my book, Landscapes in Watercolour, Techniques and Tutorials for the Complete Beginner. It's packed with 10 projects and lots of useful information on basic techniques for you, and more advanced tips and techniques too. So follow the links below if you're interested in taking a look. Well, I hope that was helpful, and maybe you might like to use this idea to paint your own Christmas cards or holiday cards with the winter holiday season fast approaching. So if you enjoyed the video, then I'd love it if you could click on the thumbs up button. And also, if you're new here or if you haven't subscribed to our channel, it would be wonderful to have you as a part of our art community. It's free to do, and it really does help with our reach here on YouTube. And if you'd like to support the channel, then you could click on the super thanks button with our grateful thanks, or come and join us on Patreon. There's links to my Patreon and Morgana's in the description below. And don't forget, you can get the reference photograph there for this demo and the advert free demo too. And of course, a huge thanks to everybody that does support us on Patreon. We couldn't run this free YouTube channel without you. So I'll see you again soon. Take care and happy painting. Bye.